Welcome everyone to our experiment for our unit Water Systems on Earth. What we're going to be looking at is a simulation of what a terrain or a certain area could look like. Do you notice how there's different elevations and depressions here? So we could have something that looks like hills or mountains, and we see how it dips down and goes into different areas. So imagine this as like a hill or a mountain range. Now when precipitation falls, like we learned about already, we know that the water has to go somewhere. Sometimes it percolates into the ground, or sometimes it has to be runoff, whether it's above ground or underground runoff. So where does that runoff go, and where does all the water eventually end up? So what we're gonna ask is our little scientist Naya here to take this blue marker, and as the rain falls, or the precipitation in whatever form, we can predict about where do you think that water is going to end up. So feel free, Naya, to just take off that marker cap and draw little lines where you think water may go. So we have a large area, and we can kind of predict where we think water might end up eventually. So even if it fell up here, like she's saying, we could find that maybe it's going to end up down here anyway. Any other areas where the water can go? We learned this in another section, but she's showing two separate areas here, and what we can call that is a continental divide, where water goes to one side or the other side and flows to different final locations. But it looks like even if we go this way, it might still end up down here still eventually. What about if it fell over here, Naya? Where would that end up possibly? Do you want to draw a few more lines? And what do you think those little lines kind of represent? Those little lines are basically like streams, or even could be rivers. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. What would this be down here eventually? What would that be called? It could be just a little lake. Over here too, might just end up being a little lake. Mm-hmm. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take this spray bottle, and we're just gonna simulate it raining. All right, so if Naya holds this right above and maybe just sprays right on top, and we'll spray over a bit, and maybe I'll help in a bit too. So she's just gonna keep spraying for a while, and we'll see where that water starts flowing and where it starts just on top of the mountains, like all over the place. You see where the water's starting to run and to collect? Keep going all over. Looks like it's running down that side, so that could be a river. And we're getting a collection, aren't we? So as we continue to do this for a while, we'll end up getting something like, I'll post a picture to show what it looks like after a whole bunch. But what we're trying to simulate and look at now, you can hang tight for a second, is all the water that flows in a particular area that ends up in a certain location is called, here's the key word of what we're demonstrating, a watershed. So this little hill or mountain range represents a watershed. So a watershed for an area will always collect into the same place eventually. We have many different watersheds in Saskatchewan. I think there's about 14 to 17 different watersheds. So depending where the water falls, will eventually end up in some lake, maybe Turtle Lake, or maybe even past Saskatchewan. It might run right through Saskatchewan in the North Saskatchewan River and eventually end up in Hudson Bay. So now we know that the water that flows in a particular area that collects in a certain area is called a watershed. Thank you.